I'm Christina Arsenault, the director of the Niles History Center.
And I'm Molly Watson, the assistant director.
So, Molly, we're asked all the time, is the Chapin Mansion haunted?
Yes, we do get that question a lot. And I have to say, having worked in the building since late 2015, the answer is no, it is not haunted. However, we are also asked a lot, did anyone die in the home? And the answer to that is yes. Henry and Ruby Chapin, who built the house, both died there, and as typical in grand Victorian fashion, their funeral services were held in the home.
So yeah, let's learn a little bit about Henry and Ruby. Henry Chapin was born in 1813 in Massachusetts. He married Ruby Nooney in 1836. They lived in Ohio and moved to Michigan in 1846. Henry and Ruby had 4 children. Their son, Henry E., died before the age of 3, and their daughters Carrie and Sarah died as young adults. Their son Charles married Emily Coolidge, and together they had 8 children. A successful businessman, Henry owned a general store, an insurance business, and was an investor in electric power. His son Charles was his business partner in many of his ventures.
Henry and Ruby Chapin built their fabulous house in 1882 after iron ore was discovered on land they owned in the Upper Peninsula. While being built, local newspapers reported regularly on the house's progress. One paper said, "The Chapin Mansion is rearing its massive proportions heavenward as fast as active and skilled hands can push it forward." Henry Chapin died in 1898 at the age of 85. His death was attributed to, quote, the feebleness of old age. Papers across the states reported his death, calling him the richest man in Michigan. It was common practice during this era to hold a visitation or wake at one's home. Christina, would you read the mortuary record? Please note, as typical of the era, it is very dramatic and grand.
It certainly is, okay? About the hour of last midnight, the death angel summoned the soul of H.A. Chapin to the great hereafter. Our wealthiest citizen, to whom this world offered much, surrendered all his earthly possessions, and his soul took its flight to another world, leaving behind the mortal remains to be consigned to the impartial grave. The sad funeral bells will ring out no more for H.A. Chapin. His mortal remains today were tenderly and reverentially consigned to the grave in Silverbrook Cemetery, the silent city so richly adorned by nature, so grand in its almost perennial solitude. Reverend J.G. Lowry impressively performed the funeral service at his late residence. The remains of Mr. Chapin reposed in an elaborate oaken casket, handsomely trimmed and almost hidden from view by a profusion of flowers of varied hue and with Masonic emblems. The ceremony at the house was interspersed with vocal melody. Among the selections rendered so sweetly was "Asleep in Jesus." The funeral cortege pensively wound its way to Silverbrook Cemetery, where the Masonic ritual was performed. The large concourse of Niles people that followed the remains of Mr. Chapin to their last resting place testified abundantly to the eminent esteem in which the deceased was held by the people generally. Ruby died in 1902. Her obituary is almost as dramatic. Molly?
Okay, her obituary reads, "Mrs. H.A. Chapin peacefully passed away in the evening of her life at her magnificent home. The funeral services were held this afternoon at 2:30 at her late residence on Main Street. The last sad rites were attended by a large body of sympathetic friends and Reverend J.G. Lowry, their deceased spiritual advisor for many years, conducted the sad services. The remains were conveyed to Silverbrook Cemetery and laid to rest beside her husband."
So the house that reared heavenward was ultimately visited by the death angel who claimed its builders, Henry and Ruby Chapin. Their son Charles Chapin died in 1913. Though he had been living in Chicago, his body was brought back to Niles and a service was held at the mansion in grand family tradition. He was buried at Silverbrook. His wife Emily died in 1925 in California. Her services were held at the home of her son in Chicago. Afterward, her remains were transported to Niles for burial at Silverbrook, though no visitation was held for her in the family home.
Lest we forget the less wealthy among us, we must also mention another death and funeral which took place at the mansion. Mrs. Minnie Paper was born in Germany and served as the Chapins' longtime housekeeper. She stayed in the home as caretaker after Ruby died. Minnie was a member of the fraternal organization Ladies of the Modern Maccabees, Niles Hive number 39. Mrs. Paper died of diabetes in the home in 1918. Her services were held at the house, and she was buried at Silverbrook. Looking at her obituary, it notes that she died in the southwest bedroom.
Wait, is that our offices?